welcome back to Wrestling Flash. In this WWE and all things wrestling video we are going to look at Paul Heyman personally attacks Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman's brutally honest take on Roman Reigns versus The Rock, WWE fires Sasha Banks and Naomi, Bryan Danielson gets a scary injury on AEW Rampage tapings, and more. First, let's look at WWE fires Sasha Banks and Naomi. WWE Women's Tag Team Champions Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out of Monday Night Raw this week after a creative dispute over their booking. The pro wrestling world has been buzzing with this incident, with varied opinions on the matter from fans and fellow wrestling personalities. Interestingly, WWE has openly released a statement on the matter. In it, the company called out Banks and Naomi for failing to meet the requirements of their contracts with the company. As a result, many fans are curious as to whether WWE could release Sasha Banks and Naomi following this controversial incident. According to an updated report from Fightful Select, those they spoke to backstage do not expect WWE to let the duo go. However, they noted that there is no certainty about the situation. The originally planned main event of this week's Monday Night Raw was Sasha Banks, Naomi, Doudrop, Nikki Ash, Becky Lynch, and Asuka facing each other in a six-pack challenge. The winner was set to earn a shot at Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair at WWE Hell in a Cell 2022. According to PW Insider, WWE originally planned to have Naomi win this match and face Belair. Additionally, there were also talks for Sasha Banks to challenge SmackDown Women's Champion Ronda Rousey at Hell in a Cell. However, the plan was for both these stars to lose their matches to the two women's champions and put them over. The conceived storyline idea was that Naomi would then go on to Hell in a Cell and lose to Bianca Belair. There are some who believe that at this week's SmackDown, an angle would have also been shot for Sasha Banks to wrestle and lose to Ronda Rousey, likely also at HIAC. So, the women's tag team champions would have effectively been used to put over the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship title holders in the weeks ahead, reported PW Insider. After Sasha and Naomi walked out of Raw, WWE was forced to change the main event at the last minute and make it a one-on-one match between Becky Lynch and the Empress of Tomorrow ultimately scored the victory, so she will challenge Belair at Hell in a Cell. Banks and Naomi still hold the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships, and it remains to be seen what the future holds for them after they walked out of Raw this week. Recent reports suggest why Sasha Banks and Naomi have not yet been fired by WWE. According to the latest reports, WWE Women's Tag Team Champions Sasha Banks and Naomi won't be fired despite their recent actions. This past Monday on Raw, Banks and Naomi walked out of the arena as they were unsatisfied with their current booking as tag champions and the women's tag team division not being taken seriously by WWE higher-ups. Despite walking out of their place of work, Dave Meltzer reported on the recent edition of Wrestling Observer Radio why the two superstars are yet to be fired. If it was another time in another place, it's very possible that they would have been fired, but it's this time in this place. I remember when the Charlotte Flair thing happened with Becky Lynch and I was talking to people there and it was kind of, if it was another time in another place, yeah, they would have fired Charlotte Flair for what she did on live TV screwing up the angle on purpose. But it's like, do you want to send her to AEW? No, and essentially nothing happened and they don't want to send either of them to AEW. Then you've got the whole Naomi married to Jimmy Uso. It's just a waiting game to see what happens next. With Sasha Banks and Naomi's walkout just a few days ago, it may be some time before the full story of what transpired this past Monday comes to light. Since the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions walked out of the arena on Monday, fans have been waiting to hear a response from Naomi or Sasha Banks. While both have remained relatively quiet, Banks' activity on her Twitter account has hinted at how she may be feeling. The boss unfollowed many big names on WWE's roster, including Bayley, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, and Vince McMahon. As someone who has begun to build a career outside of WWE, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that fans may never see Sasha Banks in the ring again. Bryan Danielson gets a scary injury on AEW Rampage tapings. Bryan Danielson recently suffered an apparent injury in the AEW Rampage tapings after a gruesome incident. Danielson is a member of the Blackpool Combat Club along with Jon Moxley, Wheeler Yuta, and William Regal as manager. They are currently undefeated in trio matches, beating the Gun Club, The Factory, Andrade Family Office, and Brock Anderson, Lee Johnson, and Dante Martin. Nick Swanson tweeted a video of Danielson's leg getting wedged between the ring and the ramp, making him trapped for 10 minutes in the process. A member of the AEW medical team tried his best to remove the leg of the American Dragon. According to Sescoops, when Danielson got out of the trap, he was visibly hobbling. Scary moment at the taping of #EW Rampage as Bryan Danielson's leg got stuck between the ring and the ramp and was trapped for over 10 minutes after the show ended #AEW, Swanson tweeted. Earlier on Dynamite, Danielson was involved in a segment with his group, Eddie Kingston, Santana, Ortiz, and the Jericho Appreciation Society. Earlier on Dynamite, longtime wrestling veterans William Regal and Chris Jericho met each other, along with their respective groups, Blackpool Combat Club, Proud and Powerful, and Eddie Kingston, and the Jericho Appreciation Society. The Wizard immediately hurled insults at the former NXT general manager by saying he was an addict and a wasted talent. The latter got back at the former, saying his voice was irritating and he would put his toothbrush straight up the rear end. After numerous banters from both sides, Jon Moxley proposed a 5-on-5 match at Double or Nothing 2022 instead of Jericho's Stadium Stampede, which the latter agreed on. Eddie Kingston and Bryan Danielson ended the segment by confronting each other, despite being upcoming teammates. The battle lines for the Blackpool Combat Club, Proud and Powerful, Eddie Kingston vs. Jericho Appreciation Society have been drawn. However, it remains to be seen how Danielson will respond after suffering that freak accident in the tapings. Paul Heyman's brutally honest take on Roman Reigns vs. The Rock. Paul Heyman has an interesting opinion on Roman Reigns possibly facing The Rock in a dream WWE match. It has been widely speculated that The Rock could return to the ring against his real-life relative at WrestleMania 39 on April 1st, 2023. Last month, the Hollywood star's Young Rock television series even teased that the match could happen one day. Heyman, Reigns' on-screen special counsel, told Sportskeeda Wrestling's Kevin Kellam that the never-before-seen match is simply a fantasy. "We can speculate all we want about Dwayne The Rock Johnson stepping into the ring with Roman Reigns," Heyman said. "It's masturbatory fantasies until there's a piece of paper in front of us with Dwayne Johnson's signature on it. Then I know it's real, and until then it's just fantasy. It's a fantasy of Dwayne Johnson's to come and get the rub from the tribal chief Roman Reigns." The former Raw executive director further clarified that the match is a dream for The Rock and not necessarily for the man he represents. "It's a fantasy of Dwayne Johnson to feel the energy of 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 people live, cheering on as the tribal chief smashes The Rock," Heyman added. "It's a fantasy of Dwayne Johnson to step into the ring with the greatest of all time, Roman Reigns. Then, now, and forever. Not until he puts his name on a contract, it's just his fantasy." While The Rock is among the biggest box office draws in Hollywood, Reigns has headlined 6 WrestleMania events over the last 8 years. Discussing the financial side of Rock vs. Reigns, Heyman told a story about the way a friend of his conducts business with important chief executive officers. The former ECW owner's analogy appears to hint that he thinks the Great One will return to WWE if the price is right. "I had a friend who was a very prominent litigator, used to be involved in lawsuits that were in hundreds of millions of dollars. ExxonMobil, AT&T, multi-billion-dollar corporations, way beyond the scope of most people's imagination. And he would tell stories that sometimes he would go to the CEO and say, 'Well, the settlement offer is $350 million, and the CEOs would say, I want $1 billion. He would say to the opposition, "Cut me the check." And he'd walk into the CEO's office and he'd put down a check for $350 million and say, "Take a good look at it and then tell me no." For now, Reigns looks set to continue feuding with Drew McIntyre on SmackDown. The undisputed WWE Universal Champion has not defended his titles on television since defeating Brock Lesnar in a unification match at WrestleMania 38. Paul Heyman personally attacks Roman Reigns. Paul Heyman has given his thoughts on Drew McIntyre possibly facing Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal Champion. Reigns teamed up with the Usos to defeat McIntyre and RK Bro earlier this month at WrestleMania Backlash. While WWE has not yet announced the Tribal Chief's next challenger, he looks set to go one-on-one with the Scottish Warrior in the near future. Speaking to Sportskeeda Wrestling's Kevin Kellam, Reigns' special counsel made it clear that McIntyre is a worthy opponent for the 6-time WrestleMania main eventer. "It appears that Drew McIntyre thinks that he's next," Heyman said. "Drew McIntyre is very capable. You're only as great as the challengers that you turn back." In 2019, Reigns picked up one-on-one victories over McIntyre at WrestleMania 35 and Stomping Ground. He also defeated the 2-time WWE champion via disqualification on the May 6, 2019 episode of Raw. A year later, the head of the table recorded another win over his long-term rival in a champion versus champion match at Survivor Series. To date, McIntyre has never defeated the former Shield member in a televised singles match. Moving forward, Reigns is not advertised to appear at the Hell in a Cell Premium live event on June 5th. That means a match against McIntyre will almost certainly have to wait until later this summer.